Welcome to Beyond Just Business, the podcast for those who want more. More clarity, more direction, and potentially more meaning. We explore the thinking behind success, the habits that shape performance, and the questions that go deeper than profit margins. If you're ready to challenge the obvious and rethink the way life and business work, you are absolutely in the right place. Okay, Paul, so we're back with our next episode, and following on from our chat about emotional intelligence, I think we had a real broad stroke of conversation which went from everything to do with the role of emotion, how you can take that self-audit, and we threw in a little bit of aliens and the futuristic talk as well for anyone who's got a jonesing for a new Marvel movie coming out at any stage in the future. So if Tony Stark is listening, you heard it here first. AI is coming for you, whether you like it or not. So to follow on from that, we're going to have a discussion about the confidence to change, because we had a listener who sent in a query or an inquiry about this topic, and we just thought we'd give it the time it deserves. So I'll let you take the lead on it, Paul, for today. So give me an idea of what comes to mind when we talk about the confidence to change.
Okay, what comes to mind for me is more around people believe or perceive that they've got to present themselves in a particular way because that's what society says, or that's what their peer group says. So let me give an example of that. If you're an accountant and qualify as an accountant, you're perceived to present yourself in a particular way. If you're in the corporate world, you again perceive you got to present yourself in a particular way, whether it's the pinstripe suit or whether it's whatever outfit, if you're male or female or whatever it might be, and so on. If you're a doctor, you've got to present yourself in a particular way. If you're a lawyer, you've got to present yourself in a particular way. So we kind of fall into the trap of, okay, so this is the uniform, for want of a better word, of what I should present myself as opposed to being who you truly are and want to dress and present yourself in the way that you feel more authentic, or you feel that you want personally to present yourself at. Do you have the confidence? And maybe it's not confidence, but do you have what you need in order to actually make that shift and to be able to present yourself in that way? So that's nearly the kickoff point for me on that one.
And the person who inquired or had this concept, they've obviously made a big life transition, and we're not going to give any names or details away, but they would have come from something that would have been considered quite corporate, quite structured. And the nature of the business they were in would have a real historic feel to it. Boardrooms, this is how it's done. Well, this is how it's always been done. And if you took a different approach, either you were potentially a troublemaker, or there could be a case that you're playing outside the lines and people may not be able to understand the measure of you. So when people like this, in general terms, either take a step back or take a step sideways and go into a different role, or try and explore another element of their personality or their skill set, what do you think is the biggest challenge to unlearn that? Because if you put on a suit, we gave an example before the call today where I said when I was in school, I went to a school that you had to wear a uniform and you had to have a certain style of haircut. It wasn't allowed to be too short. As soon as summer came along, I was the first one down to Jordan's Barbers in Booterstown Avenue, and I got a blade 2, would you believe? So, but I knew it was going to grow back. And this happened for years. And then when I left school, the first thing I did was dye my hair blonde and get a blade 1. So when I quit, and it was horrible. It was a sight to behold. But the concept is the same.
I don't want that image.
But if you're not careful, well, I'll send you a photo. That's my threat to anyone. Anyone who badmouths me in public, I'll send them on the photo. But when I use that as an example, that's a real early case of trying to fulfill some need or want to be confident in myself and to do what I wanted to do. So when you think of confidence and changing, what do you think is the biggest impetus for people? Is it that they reach a certain stage where they can do no more? Or is it just that there's this yearning within them that they have to give this the time it deserves, even if they revert back to their old ways in inverted commas? What would you think?
I think a lot of them will still stick to the rule book because they feel they should, to have to, need to. So they should wear the suit. They should present themselves in a particular way. So they stick to the need from that perspective. There's other people probably closer to my generation who kind of say, I don't really care anymore. And now, whether that's confidence, whether it's self-worth, whether it's age, I think that there's a few elements in play. The younger you are, I think the more you want to be accepted. And you want to be accepted in society, accepted in your peer group and so on. So there's a level of not wanting to step outside of that. But I think the nugget of it all really actually comes back into self-worth. So the more you absolutely know and believe in your own self-worth and who you are, your strengths, what makes you up and so on, I think it becomes an awful lot easier then to present yourself in the way that you want to present yourself. It's not about not caring about what other people think. I think it's just about being true to yourself, going out to the world in how you want to be, and not being attached to what other people think. So again, it's not about not caring about them. It's more around not being attached to their perspectives, because that's other people's perspectives. You're not paying rent to them and to be in their head. So you can't be in their head. You just got to be true to yourself.
And where does that start though?
In which way?
When you think of that being confident within yourself, like, is that a childhood thing? Because, I've known people when I was younger that you go to a beach and for me, it was body dysmorphia or having that confidence in your body. And they'd be the first on the beach, top off, playing football. And if you met them now, they would absolutely, like, by virtue of life and climbing the corporate ladder, the body is slightly different, let's just say, but they'd still have the top off just as fast. And for me, it was always mindful because that was a physical example of someone's inner confidence. They knew themselves, they were happy within themselves. Does that start from a young age where someone tells you you're great?
Really, really.
And so and then it means that when you're older, you wear the loud shirt or the different colored or unique style, and you're okay in that because that's what suits you and your disposition. I'm reminded of Sam Zell, who's a really prolific real estate investor in the United States, and he was absolutely famous for wearing jeans first and foremost, but, like, the most absolutely garish shirts and open-toed sandals to board meetings. Now, this guy was he was a deal maker to beat the band. He was a phenomenal guy for putting together a deal. But when I read his book, and there's a couple of chapters on this about what he wore, I thought, well, that's great for him. He was doing deals for billions and he'd already made a few quid by the time he got to that. But I'm overlooking the time when he didn't. He went somewhere and maybe begrudgingly put on a shirt because he had to. And then he did that for a period of time, but then sat back into the person he wanted to be and how he wanted to present himself. When you see people nowadays, there is a line that has to be towed. There's certain companies that if, you're meant to wear X, it's not the done thing to do Y. And that's just a physical example or the physical manifestation of what can happen in an office where someone says, you're meant to wear this, but also you're not supposed to be on your phone until your lunch break or whatever it may be. When someone is associating their abilities with what they want from life and then their skill set and what they want to do professionally, how can someone take a self-assessment of what they could do, should do, would like now? We're going into the shoulds here. We don't want to shut all over ourselves. But the idea of, like, that introspective piece of, what, people come home, and I always remember when I'd taken off a tie, I had this thing of, when I was younger, a tie was a novelty. I used to go to the races on Stevens's Day. I got to wear a quirky color tie because I didn't have to do it every day. And then when I had to do it every day, my God, did I delight in taking it off. And then I did an overcorrection and now I wear t-shirts and bomber jackets. So, at least it's not pajamas. But when I look at that, for me, I say, well, I still want to dress well. I still want to look slick, but it goes deeper than that for me. For me, it's no, this is a person who's in control of what they do. I like to do things a certain way. I want to be authentic and authoritative in terms of my business and how I do things. But I'm not trying to dress a certain way that someone thinks I'm acceptable to then listen to what I have to say.
Yeah.
Is that age related, or is that something you can instill in someone who's a child, that as they grow and as they work through the professional ranks, they can become more confident?
You can instill it from a very, very young age. So the formative years is really what we're getting back to, which is from 0 to 7, typically. Now, I say it extends beyond 7 and goes up to around age 12. That's where I've seen it happen from that perspective. In those years, that's referred to as your formative years. So you can instill it in children from that perspective. If you got, again, it's funny, based on our last episode, we talked about EQ, or emotional intelligence. If you have a high level of emotional intelligence, if somebody says something to you in your formative years, you will react very, very differently to somebody with a low level of emotional intelligence. So what I mean by that is, if somebody was to say to you, oh, geez, I don't like that shirt you're wearing, for example. Well, now we'll make ourselves smaller as a result of that. So that forms a pattern and a belief for the rest of our life going forward. But ultimately, it's a couple of things to come to mind. One is, there's so many people that invest in self-esteem. Now, self-esteem is where you do things, and again, it's people's understanding of self-esteem versus self-worth. But a lot of people do things from a self-esteem perspective because, again, they want to be accepted and they want to be seen as being best thing since sliced bread. So they'll drive the car, they'll buy their house, They'll dress in a particular way in order to want the approval of other people. So they're doing things for other people in order to feel good about themselves. So that's how that equation works. Whereas self-worth is you absolutely have the value within yourself. So if you were to actually ask yourselves the question, as in no matter what age you are, it's more a case of, so what, you know, and again, I'm kind of phrasing this in a particular way, but why are you driving the car that you drive? Why are you living in the house that you want to live in? Why are you wearing the particular clothes that you're wearing? Like, so if you ask the reason behind what it is that you're doing, now you'll be able to determine whether it's self-esteem or whether it's self-worth. So I drive a 2011 S-Class Mercedes because I absolutely love that car. It's whatever now at this stage, it's what, 19 years old or whatever. Every single time I sit in that car, I absolutely love the car because it represents something for me going back years and years and years. When I first saw the first model of that particular make come out, I said, I want one of those. And I haven't put in a car since that would surpass it. So that's the reason why I have that particular car, as opposed to changing the car for, the latest model of whatever, where Mercedes, BMW, whatever it might be, and so on. If I was doing it for somebody else, I'd be probably driving the latest car. But the fact I'm driving that particular car is because I'm actually doing it for myself. It's not what other people think. It's actually, I'm doing it for myself. So I think you've got to start there in terms of the clothes that you're wearing. Are you wearing them because you feel absolutely comfortable in them and you're doing it for yourself? Or are you trying to keep other people happy, whether it be your peer group or whether it be your family or friends or whatever it be and so on? I think it's got to start there.
It's interesting you say that, because when people put a value on something, the assumption is that it has to be new. And I think when you delve into it, I was quite similar, that I've done the new car stuff when I was younger, 22, 23, bought the new car. My motivations were completely to make someone else think or convince someone else that I was worthy of X or that I was up to muster or whatever it might be, to my own detriment. What a phenomenal lesson it was. But when I think back to it now, there's a sadness as to why people do things. And one person's version of happiness could be so much simpler if they're really honest with themselves. And that could just be a pair of quirky socks. It doesn't have to be like a total overhaul. And I know we're using clothes as an example, but when you think of the confidence to change, it comes to exploring what life is and means to you personally. And you're going to have someone that says, I'm in a corporate job and I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater yet, but there's a part of my professional life that I want to explore. Maybe it's doing a course that's outside of the norm, or maybe it's exploring a subject matter that mightn't necessarily seem pertinent to your position. Do you think now that people almost feel that they can do that? Because I think sometimes we get so busy doing so many things that the fun hobbyist idea or the silliness, like silliness could be studying something that for you really scratches that itch, but it doesn't make any sense if you're in law
Yeah.
or if you're in property or whatever it may be. Do you think that we're encouraged to do that now, or by virtue of life, is it a case of, look, if you're not going to toe the line, get off and find yourself, but not on my time?
I think a lot of it isn't encouraged, but I would absolutely encourage it. Yeah, absolutely. I think we have a lot more opportunity now to do those things than we did pre-COVID. Because again, even from a learning perspective, we can learn so much from other areas around the world without having to fly anywhere. We can do so much more now, but I don't think society yet is encouraging it. But I personally would absolutely encourage it, because you never know what's going to come out of those pursuits. So if it's a case of you got an interest, or as you say, Andrew, you've got that itch that you want to scratch it, because you never know where that's going to go.
And it's a fascinating exercise when you watch people who they have an identity within a certain space or a certain position. And I know a few of them now that are exploring. And there's a tentative exploration where, they're coming out of the proverbial closet, essentially, in their own minds, because they built this castle of, well, this is who I am and this is what I do. And the ironic thing is, when you equate it to, I would like to think I'm open-minded. I want my kids to be, I think there's jobs that don't exist yet that for my kids, they will create something out of nowhere. I mean, there's someone somewhere on the internet that makes a gajillion dollars taking photo of feet. So I'm not, nothing, all bets are off as far as I'm concerned. I'd like to think that my children won't do that, but there's opportunity everywhere, put it that way. But I do think there's that changing of the guard concept, that you have brands that have been built by people who had that really stalwart, stubborn way of getting things done. They created phenomenal businesses that were, let's say 20, 30, 50, 60 years old. And then when someone comes in that isn't translating exactly as that person wanted to, there is that kind of butting of heads.
Yeah.
Business does evolve, people evolve, and we change in ways. And I don't know, I don't know. I do wonder that, and the person who sent in this, I mean, they've got such a great attitude. There's such a great opportunity ahead of them and exploring what life means for them. And it's been an absolute pleasure to watch. But I equally think that you'd sometimes love to rip the band-aid off faster and say, go on, just jump into that there and give it a go. Have it fail, inverted commas. In the grand scheme of life, it's not anything.
Yeah.
And don't waste the next number of years hoping that you can kind of peel back the curtain just a little bit to show a little bit of color. And I think that's the thing. If you were to take an element of the Steve Jobs idea, get on with it and fail. It's like, get the first model out, get on with it, and really don't be afraid, because, today's newspaper is tomorrow's floor covering, or whatever the phrase is. And it's interesting that you said about that EQ idea, that I can still remember people who maybe said things that were unkind when I was a kid, and I can almost remember the date and time and where I was, rather than not caring. And I suppose that's in my nature. That's fine, and I've made peace with that in ways. But when you're,
I think you'll find your tribe.
yeah,
If you do, the more true to yourself you are, I think you'll attract the people that you want that are more like you. And the other people that aren't, they'll go by the wayside. I think you'll find your tribe from that perspective.
do you think it's lonely for people though? Because when you look back retrospectively, like if we're taking a spiritual aspect of it, and I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, but Michael Singer, The Untethered Soul, when you imagine, or the surrender experiment, sorry, that's the one I was saying, that, surrendering to opportunity, saying yes to things that didn't necessarily make sense. And when you read it almost like the equivalent of it, this is your life, you can gloss over 10 years of hardship, where someone might say, well, that was a tough period in your life. And when you're sitting there in the suit, having made it or not made it, you could say, yes, when you're in there and you're in that 10-year period. I mean, I'm in a business where I'm 5 years in, and there's days where I kind of just think, I could open up a sweep shop and it'd just be easier. I could just close, I can sell, I can eat my own produce. It'd be fantastic. But all joking aside, when people are in the middle of it, there probably is that discomfort in confidence as well. So you're trying to, when you're exploring finding your tribe, in whatever way that means, your tribe could be the corporate tribe. It could be another version of whatever you're doing for day-to-day life, but with your own little turn on it.
Mm.
What would you say to people who are trying to explore it, but they're in that wilderness of not knowing what in the name of God it's all meant to mean? Because one thing I will say, what's been around for the past up until now is kind of the known. If I put on a suit and I toe the line of a certain thing, historically, this is what happens. There's a certain number of people that'll get on the board. Here's the things that can happen at the executive level, whatever it may be, economic conditions, X, Y, Z, insert financial report here. What if someone dips a toe outside there, but they feel like, gee, is this ever going to end? But does it end? Is probably my question.
Does what not end?
Does the unknown, even if you go to what is always known, does it ever really end? So like you could have someone that does what everyone has always done, but they're just continuing in the same frame of reference that everyone else has.
So it's actually stepping into the unknown. So that there will never be an unknown, or there will never not be an unknown, double negative. So the unknown is always going to be there. Always. We think we know the galaxy, as in the universe, from that perspective, as in, what's beyond the Hubble telescope. We don't. We've no idea. And that's the complete unknown. And that's just sheer amazement from that perspective. So I think it's actually stepping into the unknown. And I remember hearing this phrase before from somebody, and it is about taking the leap of faith. And you got to literally just jump. And when you jump, the parachute always shows up. Always. Every single time. If you trust and you believe and you take the leap of faith and you jump, you'll always be caught. So from that perspective, as you were talking there in relation to the person that sent in the request, I was reminded of my brother, Eugene, who studied in Trinity College. He studied computer science, got his degree, was a professor there and so on. He passed away when he was 53. So probably about 7 years before that, a good number of years before that, he left Trinity College, set up his own computer company. He brought the first free computers into Ireland. But later on, he ran that for a good number of years. Then went off and studied to become a baker. I'm not joking it. Yeah. So you're completely opposite. So you're talking from somebody that studied computer science from an engineering perspective to literally somebody who went off, studied bakery, as in to become a baker, came back, opened a shop in was it Rapmines, I think. Yeah, Rapmines, and opened a shop there, bakery, selling bread. And he would get up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning in order to bake the bread, all different types of bread, for his customers the next day. And that was one of the times that he was actually the happiest in his life. So what I'm saying to you is, it may not be that you're developing the company, or sorry, not a company, but it may not be that you're developing the next big corporation. But when you take those breadcrumbs of scratching those itches of what actually comes up, and it's passion that you want to pursue or an interest that you want to pursue, go after it, because you never know what's going to come up. But you might actually find that you're the happiest at the end of it.
And also one thing, like taking that surrender experiment concept of, we have an idea that if we toe the line, everything is controlled and everything's controllable. But the ironic thing is that it's the polar opposite. Whereas if you lean into the stuff that you're actually wanting to explore, and this again is it's not a caveat that people need to upend their lives completely. A lot of it is just listen to the voice, maybe try something, step into that unique feature. But also, I think sometimes people think, well, if I'm not going to be Musk, I mightn't bother. What's the point? There's a prolific number of leaders in different positions now, good, not good. A lot going on in the conceived idea of what's good or whatever in the world now. Again, it's always both sides. There's a lot of people in the middle who've made a phenomenal living and a really fulfilling life. And one person might be more drawn to the guy who created Patagonia and the ethos behind that and why they did it. Yeah, we can make money, but we can also make a change. And then someone else wants to climb the corporate ladder. But I think leaning into that itch is something that people owe it to themselves. So I think, to finish off, if you were to leave someone with a parting phrase about taking that leap, what would you say to them? Someone who's there, they arrive in a pinstripe suit, they sit down and they say, there's something here I want to try. How do you get them to take that first step?
I don't know how, well, okay, each client is unique and differently. But what actually comes to mind is life is too short. Like seriously, life is too short. So actually you want to live the next 20, 30 years, living a life and wearing the same suit that you've been wearing for years for the rest of your life? Or do you actually want to be more true to yourself and live a life that you want to actually enjoy? Because life is, I know you have the meaning of life, Andrew. I have no idea what the meaning of life is.
Answer 11, Paul. I didn't want to tell you until next episode, but sure, fine, I'll let it go.
But you've got to have fun. Life is so short. You got to have fun every single day. That should be your maximum, is literally just have fun every day.
Yeah. And I think that's the best place to leave it. So thank you to our listener who sent in the question. I hope you got value from it, and join us next time when we discuss another topic that is absolutely at odds with what you think we're going to talk about. And that's it for another episode of Beyond Just Business. If it gave you something to think about, or it helped you see things a little differently, we're delighted. But make sure you're following so you don't miss out on the next episode. Stay curious, keep questioning, and we will see you next time.